Hi everyone, this is Sean Ismail from the Cloud Ranger, and you are viewing the Microsoft Azure training. Today is the part 5 of our Azure Virtual Machines, and this is not going to be a very lengthy session, and it's going to be all about Azure Images. It follows our Azure Virtual Machines part 4, where we have done similar things with VHDs or Azure Data Disks, and now we are going to move into similar things, but we are going to talk about images. Images are nothing new. These are things we have been using quite a bit when we were making the virtual machines throughout our previous sessions. Anytime we were making a virtual machine, like I mentioned in my last session, we were not creating a new provisioning a new operating system by installing Windows per se. What we were doing is we were going to Azure's pre-built images and we were just provisioning a virtual machine based on one of those images. So we're going to talk about a little bit in details about how these images are made, how they're stored, how you can make your own, including uploading from your own premises. Okay, so let's get started. So images in general, if you are going to talk about on premises, something that I do a lot while learning is that, okay, cloud seems to be a new topic, well, relatively new topic. So how is it similar to on premises? So I keep comparing. I always tend to do that. And the best way I can think of images or images in general from your on-premise implementation is that they are nothing but templates. So if you're in VMM and you're creating a template, you're basically creating an image that you can use later to provision your virtual machines from as many times as you want or whatever. It is the base operating system image for a new VM. So this is a no-brainer that you're creating a new virtual machine rather than creating and installing one. You can always spin one off the image. So it will have the base operating system. Now, having said that, um, images are basically used for quick deployments of virtual machines and even backups. So let's talk about backups a bit later, but what does it mean by quick deployments? Well, what it means is that rather than installing an operating system, you will save time provisioning a virtual machine from an image because the installation is already done. So there are a lot of technologies that are in place to make sure that when you provision a virtual machine, it's a brand new operating system that's not a part of your previous operating system. So basically, you're creating a new operating system. And images can help you quite a bit with that because now that you're not creating from scratch, you do save time. But there are a lot of things that need to be done when images are created because of that. Now, certain images can be used as backups, and I was a little confused when I came across this. Images can be used as a quick backups. What I found out is that in Azure, you have several kind of images, and there is a specialized image that we will come into later, which can be used as a sort of snapshot, similar to on-premise, of your virtual machine in Azure. So something happens to your virtual machine, you can actually go back to that image, which is essentially a snapshot, and uh, provision your VM from there, and you would be okay. Now, calling that a robot like a calling that a robust backup solution is probably not accurate, but it's pretty handy when you are installing a new application or you are doing customization on the VM itself, where you want to make sure that if anything happens, you can revert back. So in Azure, in virtual machines, you actually do not have snapshots. So this is when these specialized images can come into use. When Azure initially started, there was this image called the OS image, and like the name sounds, it is all about the operating system disk that was being imaged. This was back when Azure started, but now you have the VM image or the virtual machine image, which is both the OS and the data disk, and they call this the modern images because you can take an image of not only the operating system, but if there are any data disks with it. So that makes it quite handy for certain scenarios, and VM images are the one that we will be concentrating on. Okay, so there are two types of Azure images. I briefly touched this in the last slide. The first one is generalized or generic images, and the second one is the specialized images. We'll go through both of these. Azure images are created in two ways. One is capturing an existing VM that's running in Azure, means that you have a virtual machine that's already in Azure. You provision it from the given image that Azure provides you. Then you install your applications, you do different things to your VM, put your folders, data, whatever you need to do. And then you can create an image out of the VM you're already running. In Azure, it's called capturing. So essentially capturing is nothing but creating an image of a virtual machine that you already have running in Azure. And then you have uploading from on-premise. And this is probably the most important one, as I talked about in the previous session regarding VHDs. Uploading from premise is something that is quite interesting in the sense that you want to upload a VHD from your on-premise and you want to make an image out of it in Azure. So what will happen is that anytime for whatever purpose of your business you want to provision a virtual machine, it will be customized. So it's similar to what we did in our previous session where we'll upload a VHD, an entire VHD, which will have an operating system. So it will not be a data disk. So in a previous one, we just did like 100 megs of a data disk, but this is like a proper operating system. And you will be able to spin off virtual machines off it after you create an image out of it. Okay. So let's go and talk about generic images. Generic images are generic in nature, but what the real thing about generic images is that there are tools that are used to generalize the VM. So you want to make sure that when you have a VM with operating system installed, configured, running, and you have done all the customization that you really need to, you have to bring that out from an out-of-box experience. Means that you have to take that virtual machine and neutralize it in the sense that anything you create out of that will be a newly provisioned virtual machine. So you have to make sure that everything is taken care of in the backend to bring that out-of-box experience. And we use a tool, and some of you might be already familiar with this. It's a system preparation tool, or commonly known as the sysprep tool. It's a built-in application in the operating system that you can use to generalize the virtual machine. So that way it becomes like a template, or in our case, an image. And sysprep is there in Windows, and if you are going to use Azure for Linux VMs, you're going to use something called as WA Agent. So WA Agent is the tool that you'll have to use in Linux to generalize it. I'm not going to generalize any Linux VM today. We will just go and do the sysprep for Windows. Okay, so these are the steps that are required to capture an Azure VM from the management portal. Obviously, you can do this from management portal as well as anything we can do from PowerShell as well. So we'll be following this and capturing an image of a virtual machine that we already have running in our Azure environment, and we'll just go through that momentarily. Okay, so let me go to my client computer and show you a demo of how this is done. But these are the steps that we'll be needing to follow. All right, so we are at my client computer here, which is connected to my Azure subscription. And what I've done so far is I created a virtual machine, CRanger VM001, and that's about it. It's a general, I think it was a standard A3 image that was used to provision this. Nothing funky about this. It's very straightforward virtual machine. You can create one, as you can see. Yeah, it's an A3, standard A3 size. It's right out of the box. There's nothing fancy in here. So I want to show you a couple of things before we get started. If we go to the Images tab right now, there's nothing there. If we go to the Disks tab right now, this is the operating system disk that we have for this virtual machine. From our previous slide, we understand all of this, right? I mean, previous session, we understand all of this. Go to storage. I actually have a storage account created, Ranger Store. Ranger Store will actually have the container for VHDs that stores the VHD for that operating system I created, the virtual machine. So it's CRanger VM001. Ignore this as your Winit VHD for now, okay? That's something else. But these are the two files that were created because of the CRanger VM001. So this VHD. I want you to remember that. And there's nothing else going on. Everything is zero. If I go to all items, there's, besides the cloud service, nothing else. Okay. What I did is to save some time already RDP into this virtual machine, which is connect, and here I am. So I RDP to the machine here. Uh, I didn't configure this much except I kind of went and hit the system clock. I did a couple of things, right? And I want to show you something else here. On the C drive, I went and created a folder called My App. And in My App, there is a text document. Uh, Probably put some text in there. Just text, and there is an application, My App. This does not really run. It doesn't do anything. It's My App application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture this virtual machine and make a template out of this virtual machine. The reason I want to do this is because I want to provision my virtual machines which will be customized exactly the way it is. There's going to be no clock here. There is going to be always this folder that will have this app over here. So rather than doing this manually for my business purpose, I want my all virtual machines to have this. Okay. Obviously, Azure does not have an image to do whole My App thing. So what I'll do is I'll capture this image or capture this virtual machine and create an image out of that, consequentially. And whenever I create a new virtual machine, this will have that. So if you remember our slide, our first step here was to run sysprep. So let's go ahead and do that. The way you do that is that you will have to go to Windows, and I believe it's in System 32. There should be a folder called sysprep. And so this is the location, Windows System 32 sysprep, and there should be the sysprep utility. Your operating system should already have that. Most modern operating systems, Windows already has it there. So let's run sysprep. In sysprep, we're going to do a couple of things. So what kind of cleanup action do we need? We want this to be an out-of-box experience. Means the next time a VM is provisioned from this image, it should be as if it's a brand new installation. Okay. We also want to check the generalize, means we want to generalize this, means all the GUID for this operating system, if you're on a domain and all such, it's going to reset all of that, and it's not going to interfere with our current organization with the same server name, means that it will generalize the virtual machine or the image for you. So anything you provision out of this, you'll have to put in those information for this operating system to work. And the shutdown options, what I'm saying is that after the sysprep tool has done these things, I want it to actually shut down because I have no reason for for running this any longer, because to do the capture, you need the virtual machine to be shut down. Okay, it's because it will already have. I mean, it will have no memory commitments. It will have nothing in the memory, obviously, when it's shut down and you capture this. So let's go click on OK. It takes a little bit of time. You can see that it's going through multiple processes here, cleanup phase, plugins, and all that. And what it will do is eventually, since I said that after the sysprep is done, you need to shut down, you'll you'll find out the RDP session will end because the virtual machine has shut down. So I'm not going to wait for it. It takes like a couple of minutes. So I'm going to pause the video and come back when that's done. Okay, the virtual machine is stopped. Can any one of you tell me, now that I came to the virtual machines here, why the status is stopped? Well, if you have guessed that it's stopped because we actually shut the VM down from the RDP session, then you are absolutely right. It's just in a stopped state because this was turned off from the virtual machine itself, not from the management portal. It means it's not stopped and deallocated, and you are currently still being charged for it. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to shut it down at this point though, because I do not need this to be running at all. So I rather keep it deallocated because of the next thing that I'm going to tell you that's going to happen. So let's wait for this to shut down. Okay, that took about 30 seconds. So now you can see it's a stop deallocated because I went and shut it down from here. I went and also refreshed my portal here because I mentioned in my last session, anytime I work with data, I like to actually refresh this browser a few times to make sure that everything is caught up and up to date. Now, the thing that I wanted to tell you right now, and it's probably very important for you to remember, both for exam and both for your production environment, is that when you go and capture this VM or create an image out of this VM, You have to remember that once this is converted, the virtual machine is actually going to be deleted. Okay, so this is a very important design consideration that you have to take. So if it's a production virtual machine and you think that you're going to, somehow make an image out of this and keep it, but you do not want to delete it, you can't actually do that. You have to remember that once you have generalized something and captured and created an image out of this virtual machine will be deleted. Obviously, you can go and take that image right away and you can create a virtual machine out of it, but the one you are capturing will be deleted. Okay, so the way you capture this is you go and click on capture and you will see the image name. So I'll call it the image, I'll call it the VM name and call it, oh, I don't know. Actually, you know what? I'm going to just call this my awesome image. Okay, and put a little description. And it's asking you that did you run sysprep on the virtual machine? Yes, we did. The minute you actually click on that, you can see that it will tell you the virtual machine will be deleted after the image is captured. Because they're saying that, hey, if you have already made it generic or generalized it through sysprep, um, you can just spin a new virtual machine off it once it's created. What is the use of keeping this? Which makes sense. So I'm going to click on OK, and that's all pretty much there is to it in creating this image from that virtual machine. If you look at this, the instance over here, that it's stopped and it's updating. In images, you can see that now we have an image that's called my awesome image. This is a custom image we are working on. And it's going to do a bunch of stuff in the back end while this image is being created. So let's pause this and get back once that's done. You can see in the back end, actually, it says capturing image from the virtual machine, this one. It's actually telling you exactly what it's doing at this point. Now it's saying that it was successfully captured, but you can see it's still doing the stopped update, and poof, it disappeared. So what happened here is that as soon as it captured, it went and deleted the virtual machine as we had expected. Now, if we come to my two images over here, we can see my awesome image here, and under the disks, actually we should be seeing stuff, but let's go ahead and refresh this browser and we'll come back once everything is refreshed. Okay, I've refreshed the browser. As you can see, there's no more virtual machine here. The cloud service for the virtual machine still is here. You can delete that because since the virtual machine is no longer here, you don't need the cloud service. So let's go ahead and delete that. I just want to keep everything nice and clean. Okay, so technically all items should not have anything else. Now, the thing that I wanted to show you was the storage, and this is why we started off showing the storage. Let's go to our storage account, Ranger Store, go to our container, go to our VHDs. What do we see here? So we knew this VHD was already there. I asked you to ignore that. That's fine. This was the VHD for the virtual machine that we had, C-Ranger VM001. And you can see that it went and created my awesome image and put in some information here that this is the operating system, this is the date of VHD. So this is the VHD that belongs to the image, not the virtual machine. We do not even have the virtual machine any longer. So what you can do is very carefully delete all the stuff that was related to the virtual machine itself because you do not need that. So this was the VHD for the virtual machine, which is no longer there. So when it is captured and it deletes the virtual machine, it somehow leaves the VHD behind for you just in case. I love that idea actually, because in case there was a mistake, I can come back and now we know how to create a virtual machine from this VHD. If you followed my previous session, you can actually go and spin a virtual machine up from this one. But we don't need that, so let's go ahead and delete that as well. Delete disk and blob, okay. It will go ahead and delete all of that. So technically, you are left with only one VHD, which is my awesome image OS VHD. So if you come over here, you go to images, that's the image you have. Because the reason you have that image is because that's the custom image you have created. It's associated with your subscription, and you can do that. So the next thing I want to talk about is that, okay, now that we have created the image, how do you provision a virtual machine from this image, right? So one way to do this is you go to virtual machines and create a virtual machine. you go to From Gallery, and these are all the images that you had that Azure creates for you, right? And we have been always using this Windows Server 2012 R2 data center, and the C Ranger VM001 that I had created was from this image as well. But now if you look at My Images tab here, you can actually see my awesome image. And the reason you see this My Awesome Image is because Azure went and said that, hey, you captured this. I'm assuming that you're going to use this image to provision other VMs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the list over here. And to create a virtual machine, all you have to do is go to My Awesome Image and follow this and get out of there, right? I mean, this is pretty straight, simple, forward. Like we come to Windows Server and we take this image and go. From now on, if we want to create an image based on the virtual machine we had, we'll be doing this from here, which is pretty cool. So let's go and spin a virtual machine out of this, right? So I'm going to use my image to do this. And as you can see, since it was generalized, it's asking for new information. It's assuming that you'll create multiple things out of it. So it's asking you what's going to be the virtual machine name. So let's make it C Ranger VM002, for example. I'm saying that, hey, I'm going to name this different. Uh, I'm going to go pick A3. Since it's generalized, it's asking for newer information, so it will always ask you for all this username, password, and all of that. Obviously, this is going to be a new cloud service, East US 2. You can see the only reason this is there on East US 2 and not showing you any other regions is because where the virtual machine is stored. My storage account is actually in East US 2. So the only way I can deploy the image is by placing the virtual machine in East US 2 as well. So I can do that there. Eventually in our future sessions, we'll talk about how you can deploy it, or you can take this and move it to a different region if you have to. But right now this is only East US 2 because that's where the image itself is stored. And we'll leave everything as is. We're not going to change much out of this. Leave this as well, extensions, and we will create a virtual machine. And as you can see now, this is no different from how we have been creating virtual machine from Microsoft Azure all along this training series. So the only difference is this time it's using our custom image to deploy that rather than Microsoft's. Um, the other thing I want to show you is how do you do this while that spins up. How do you do this from Azure? PowerShell. So the way you do that, or the way you capture this, is you go and you run this save Azure image service name. You put the service name, the cloud, and cloud service name as well as the virtual machine name. You're calling the image name as my awesome image. This is the label. The thing that you have to remember here, two things actually. One is the way you do that is through save as your image commandlet. The other thing is the OS state, the operating system state. You have to remember that this is generalized because we ran sysprep. This is equivalent to clicking on that little checkbox which said that I have run sysprep. So you want to make sure this is a generalized virtual machine. So let's wait for this one to finish and we'll be back. All right, so the VM has been created. Let's go ahead and connect to the virtual machine. Okay, our VM is loading. The thing that I wanted to show you here was that if I go to the Explorer, you can actually see this is a new virtual machine. We have provisioned it from the image, and my app folder is still there, even though C Ranger VM001 is not there. So what this is like what it is. It's an image that you have customized and created from a virtual machine, which was, it's all customized the way you really wanted it, except the original settings like, this taskbar. If you remember, my original taskbar was actually small. So this is what I had done in my original one. Use a small taskbar. I hit the clock by myself though. So it's not like it carried. So those settings are not going to be carried over because this is now a generalized out of the box virtual machine, which is taken from that image. That whole sysprep, that's exactly what it does. It generalizes the VM. However, it does have that my app folder. So if you have any custom application that you had created, some data that you have kept over here, those will already be there. So this will serve the business purpose that, hey, we need to provision virtual machines which are customized or which actually has our data on there or our application installed on there, just to make sure that we do not spend so much time creating this every time we provision a new virtual machine. So those are the typical, reasons someone would actually take a virtual machine and make an image out of it and provision virtual machines from there. Okay. And I did go through this part, sorry, I did go through this part where how it is captured from the PowerShell. Okay, so that's really all there is to it from capturing a virtual machine from Azure itself. And this was the generalized or the generic image. Next, we are going to talk about the specialized images. Okay, so let's go to the slides for that. So looking at the specialized images, there are a couple of differences that we have to remember while we create the special images. So first thing is that with the specialized image, you do not have to run sysprep. Because you are not generalizing the virtual machine. You can actually run the virtual machine while you are capturing, but ideally, uh, you should probably turn the virtual machine off so there is no data loss because of some data being in the memory and as such. And when you are actually capturing the virtual machine, since you are not running the sysprep, you do not check the box that says, I have run sysprep on the VM while capturing. And since this is not a generalized VM, it's actually keeping all the properties means that when you don't generalize and run sysprep, all the properties like names and all that information are kept for the virtual machine intact. You can use this as a checkpoint for a virtual machine. Checkpoint here means pretty much the snapshot, or in Hyper-V we call it checkpoint now. So it is a checkpoint of the virtual machine where you could in some circumstances have that checkpoint of the virtual machine. So something happens with your original virtual machine, you can spin it out from that image directly. So there are subtle differences that are there between specialized images and your regular generic images. I'm assuming that you would do, or at least I do specialized images only when I want to actually take a checkpoint. I've not used it for anything else. And in the PowerShell command for this, the only difference is if you look at the OS state instead of generic, it actually says specialized. So the command let save as your VM image and everything still stays the same. So let's go ahead and get to a demo for this, and then we'll try to explain more. Okay, we are at my client machine here. So similar to the last demo we had, what I went and did was I cleaned up everything in here, okay? So I cleaned up everything, and all we have is a C-Ranger VM001. It's a new virtual machine I created from scratch. Let's go to our container here and see. You'll notice that we only have the VHD with the C-Ranger VM001 and the status over here. There's nothing else going on. And I have RDP'd to save some time in this virtual machine. And C-Ranger VM001, I did nothing except I have this folder here called My Important Documents. And in folder, I have two basic text file. So there's not a whole lot I've done here. Okay. So based on our virtual machine and what we are trying to do, we know that for the specialized virtual machine, we do not need to run sysprep. In fact, we can capture this right now without even turning off this virtual machine. But I suggest that ideally you turn this virtual machine off. So if there is any memory data or something like that, they will also be taken along with the virtual machine. You can absolutely do this without even bothering to turn this off. But let's shut this down. And once this is shut down, we'll go through the capture process, and I'll show you the subtle differences that it has with respect to the generic image, how this will be a little different. Okay, the virtual machine is shut down, stop deallocated. So let's go ahead and capture this virtual machine. So as you can see over here that you know, the first thing we'll do is give it a name. So let's just call this CRanger VM001 image. I'll just call it my custom image for CRanger VM001. And this time, the only difference that we are going to have is that we are not actually going to click on or check that I have run sysprep on this virtual machine because we have not. This is what will make it a specialized image rather than a generic image, just this checkbox. So let's go ahead and do that and let this complete. As you can see, the image has been created. Let's look at the instance. It's still stopped updating, so we'll wait for that. And it's all done right now. Okay, so the image is created. Everything is done right now. Let's go ahead and refresh the browser real quick. Okay, so the CRanger VM001 is stopped deallocated, and we also have the image. Okay, if you had paid attention in the previous one, the first question that would come to your mind is that how come this virtual machine was not deleted? I thought that when you capture a virtual machine and convert it to an image, which it has over here, you can see the image is converted, how come this virtual machine did not disappear? Well, that's another primary difference between a generic and a specialized image, is that when you create a specialized image, your virtual machine is not going to delete itself. It's still going to be there even though you are going to have it as an image. So technically, if you go and try to create a virtual machine right now from gallery, you come to images here, you can see that CRanger VM00 image is here. And you can create a virtual machine from that image. However, this virtual machine is still here. Okay, so this is another difference. Let's go to the storage account and see what we see in our storage account. So when you come to the storage account here, as you can see that it actually has the VHD for the CRanger VM001 still there, but it created that image VHD as well. This is where the virtual machine that you will go provision from the images will take the information from. Okay, so that's the images VHD, and this is the virtual machines VHD. Okay, so remember that when you do the specialized virtual machine, it will still be there. So let's do something interesting. Let's go ahead and start this CRanger VM001. We're going to just, go and get started with this virtual machine, and we are going to RDP into it, and I'm going to show you something that will make it more clear that what we can do with this image. Okay, I have RDP'd into our CRanger VM001. This is exactly the same virtual machine that we had because the virtual machine was never deleted, right? So we just went and turned it on. So let's go in there and let's go to our C drive and we are going to see our folder is there. Well, our folder is there because this is our virtual machine with our folder and everything that was there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and delete this folder for whatever reason and say that, I have deleted this folder. It's even gone from recycle bin. And all of a sudden you find out that you need this folder back, or it was a mistake, or you uninstalled an application that your company had by mistake and you needed it. All these scenarios where you can goof up on a virtual machine. So what do? Well, let's do this. Let's get out of here, turn off this virtual machine. Okay, the virtual machine is completely turned off. What I'm going to do very carefully, if you're doing this in your production, is I'm going to go and delete this virtual machine. I'm saying that, hey, I have an image, a specialized image, which is taken for this virtual machine, which is right here. And this is like a snap. So we are going to carefully go and delete this virtual machine. And I keep saying be careful because you need to know what you're doing here. You have to make sure that the image was properly captured and everything before you do this in production. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete this virtual machine. I'm going to go and do this from the cloud services here. So let's go ahead and delete the cloud service and its deployment. So this will delete the virtual machine. Okay, so it looks like the cloud and the virtual machine both have been deleted. Let's go to the storage and find out what's going on there. Okay, so we go to the VHDs container here real quick, and we'll see that those two disks are still there, so we have to delete them manually. Well, I'm not going to delete this VHD. This is the images VHD, so the VHD for the virtual machine is gone. So this is pretty much just the status file that can go. Okay, all right. So now that this VHD is there, okay, so that's all I have to show you over here. Let's go to our virtual machines. As you can see, there are no virtual machines here. Okay, just images. Okay, let's go create a virtual machine from that image. So if you go to my images here, as expected, you are going to see this image here because we created an image. It's asking for a virtual machine name. I'm going to give the same name, CRanger VM001, standard. I'm going to have it 7 gigs, A3. Okay. And we are going to create a virtual machine. Okay, the virtual machine is all created. Let's go ahead and connect to it at this point. Okay, we are all connected, RDP to the virtual machine. Now let's go to the C drive. And as you can see, my important documents is right here. Even though from the original VM, I had deleted it. And this is still CRanger VM001. So what essentially happened was that this is like the on-premise snapshot kind of thing, where my original VM had some issues. I went and deleted a folder, or I went and uninstalled an application, or whatever that I required. But I did have an image taken for this virtual machine, a specialized image, and that image kind of worked as a backup for this virtual machine. I can obviously use that image to, provision other VMs as well, which will have this information, except the fact that it holds a lot of information already of this virtual machine means it was not generalized. This looks like it is generalized, but it was not. It is still, it held all the SIDs, it held all the operating system specific information that was there for CRanger VM001, so it kind of worked as a snapshot. Okay, so that's the only time I can see how a specialized VM could come into my use, and that's what I use it for when I have like an important, some sort of a dissecting operation that's going to be done on a VM. I'm not sure if this is going to break this VM or not. I go and take a specialized VM snapshot or create the specialized image for doing this. Okay, you can do this with PowerShell as well. So let's go to PowerShell real quick and show that. It is still save as your VM image, exactly the same way we had done our generate image as well, except that this time the OS state is going to be specialized. So the previous one, it was actually generalized. In this one, it is actually going to be specialized. That's what we'll go and create that. Okay, so I think we have discussed already the two virtual machine types here, the generic and as well the specialized. Now I'm going to show you how you can take a VHD from your on-premise and you can create an image based on that, okay? And then we'll discuss about why you'd actually want to do something like that. Okay, so this happens to be, once again, Okay, so this happens to be that part of the slide where I go and tell you that this is one of the most important things that you will be doing in near future or as soon as possible after you are done with this session in your production or your lab environment. So why is this important, uploading OS VHD? Well, in our previous session, what we did was we talked about uploading data disks. Now we are talking about uploading operating system VHDs. What this does is that it takes your entire virtual machine from your on-premise and you have the capability of putting that on Microsoft Azure. And the relevance of this being very important is almost obvious, right? I mean, think about it. You have an on-premise VM, you have the capability of taking the VHD and uploading it to Azure. What happens in this process? Well, you have migrated a virtual machine from on-premise to the Azure cloud through this process. And this might be something that you want to do for your organization right away. You might say that, okay, we need to take this virtual machine and put it the way it is to our cloud and see how this works. Or, I want to know, I have this virtual machine that's been used for the server and it's important. We are moving to the cloud, if not completely. Let's see how to do that. So this makes it very, very important for you to learn or know, because that's something that's part of extending your data center to the cloud, and that's what most people are going towards. Even if you don't go completely and migrate tomorrow everything from your on-premise to the cloud, this is something you'll be starting in the near future if you do not have the capability of starting from scratch to build something on the cloud. Having said that, this is not the most simplest thing to do, in the sense that not the process itself of uploading, but there's a lot of planning behind it. I mean, you need to make sure that once you take a server from your on-premise and move it up to the cloud, you have a link or a VPN tunnel between Azure and your environment. You have to make sure that this server that you're going to migrate to Azure has all the capabilities to communicate with its, for example, database backend or whatever with your on-premise. So there's a lot of planning there, but this is how you would go and upload it. So you cannot upload a VHDX. This is similar to data VHDs that we talked about. So it has to be a VHD, and I'll tell you how you go about that process. And uploading the process for data disk from on-premise to the cloud and the OS VHDs from on-premise to cloud is the same. We are going to use the same script. And once you have uploaded the VHD, there are two things you can do, and I want you to carefully understand this. One, you can say this is a one-time thing. I took the VHD, it's on the cloud right now. I'm going to spin a virtual machine out of this, and that's it, which is fine. That's how ideally you'd migrate, because it's this one custom server that VHD you have uploaded and you're good to go. And then there might be the scenario where you say that, okay, I have this template that I have on premise, or I have this virtual machine that I have on premise that I want to build images out of. So technically, you take that from your on premise and put it to Azure, and you convert that to an image, and you spin other virtual machines or provision other virtual machines from that image. Okay, so which is kind of similar to taking a template from your on-premise and putting it to the cloud. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about VHD and VHDX. So in our previous session, what we did was that we actually went and created a data disk, which was a VHD. So we did not do any conversion. We did not do anything. We just did not touch VHDX because we knew that this is not going to happen. So what do you do if you have a virtual machine that you have created, which is a VHDX? For example, you created on VMM any new virtual machine, generation 2, it's VHDX. What do you do? Well, what I found out is there is that cool commandlet called convert-VHD, which will convert your VHDX which will convert your VHDX to VHD. Unfortunately, you do not have access to this convert VHD commandlet if you do not have the Hyper-V role completely installed on your client system or somewhere. So when I was doing this, I went to my client computer and I was like, well, let me install the Hyper-V console and see if it actually brings all those commandlets. No, it didn't. You have to install completely the Hyper-V role to actually go and do that. I did not want to do that on my client computer because I did not want my client computer to, have that extra thing for whatever reason. So I went to my server, which is running Hyper-V, and went there and one of my home servers actually, and went there and converted that. If you don't mind installing the Hyper-V role on your client computer, which is fine, it's not going to hurt you. With a Hyper-V role, you should be able to spin other virtual machines too. Most of the client computers, Windows 7, Windows 8, and all that, they actually come with the Hyper-V role that you can install. So you need to install that role completely to actually do the convert VHD. I There might be tools out there, free tools or Microsoft tools, which might allow you to do a VHDX to VHD. It's up to you really to find that. I do not know. I just used a convert VHD after installing that. I mean, on my server, Hyper-V server, because by default it's there. Once this was converted to VHD, the process was similar to actually go and upload this. Now, with the data disk, we did not have to worry about sysprep. Remember our good friend sysprep? Well, when you are going to upload a VHD, if you are going to do this just to migrate it and you just want to do this one time and move it to Azure and spin a virtual machine from that VHD and you are done, you don't have to run sysprep. But if you think that, okay, I have this virtual machine on premise, which I need to go and bring it as a template up in Azure, you have to go and run sysprep. So anytime you have to make it a template, you need to run the sysprep. That's the rule of thumb. So let's go ahead to our client computer and let's go and talk about how this can be done. Okay. Okay, we are on our client computer here. I just want to let you know that I have gone ahead and kind of cleaned up um, my subscription here. There's nothing running in here, as you can see, except that I have something in the storage, and I'll get that to momentarily. But besides that, there's nothing else. No virtual machines, no cloud services, nothing at all. So let's go ahead and talk about the script that will go and upload it. This uploading script is the same one we have used for uploading our data disk. There's not a whole lot that's happening here. I have a source, which is a VHD. This is an entire virtual machine VHD. And I'm going to the destination. We know how to do this. And we'll start to upload. And add Azure VHD is the commandlet that's taking the local source and sending it to the destination here. And I have done something here that's number of uploader threads 15, just to check if this is increasing any performance to put up and upload my VHD from here. So this is similar to what we had done to upload our data disks. So my data disk is in temp VHD over here. I'm in the temp folder here on my local computer. It's about 7.73 gigs. Uh, it's a basic install of Windows 8 with not a whole lot of things in there, so it's very small. This could very well be a Server 2012 R2, Server 2008, whatever. It's just a VHD of an entire virtual machine. That was VHDX, and I already have it converted here. Conversion process that does not take a whole lot of time from from VHDX to VHD, but still, I just wanted to save some time, so I have already done that, and I have gone and tried to upload this. Okay, so I recall in our data disk session, I went and uploaded this live for you guys. For the 7 gig of data to be uploaded to Azure on my home connection, which has like about 10 megabits up, uh, it took me about an hour and a half to actually upload this. So I'm not going to go and upload this for you. If you are going to do this at home and you're following this with my video over here and you're trying to do one on your own, it takes some time to upload this. But that's not the main thing I want to point out here. The main thing I want to point out here is that what if this was actually your production and you wanted to upload a server which could be up to like 60 gigs or, when you spin a server out 127 gigs and you try to do that. Yes, the add Azure VHD command list is supposed to be smart and only upload the bits that have been written on the VHD. Even given that, it might be 60, 70 gigs of data you're trying to upload. It will take you a considerably long amount of time. So the thing is that if you want to go and upload a server from your production, you will need some downtime to do this because it might take up to a couple of hours or a little bit more to upload one of these virtual machines. So that's something for you to remember when you do the planning, that you'll have to set aside a downtime for this to happen. And of course, you need the speed. I mean, I'm in my home connection here when I'm recording this video today, but if you're doing this from your organization, you probably might have 100 megabits uplink or something like that. Your ISP might have better speed and capacity to do this, but still, it's something you have to remember that the speed does matter when you are trying to upload this, all right? And these are the times if you're a large organization, you might want to look at that express route where you create a partnership from your site to an Azure data center, a direct link, which could go up to a gigabit or 10 gigabits, depending on how much you pay. These things will be probably much faster with a link like that. Having said that, a lot of organizations might not even be able to afford a direct link with the cloud. First of all, because they don't have a business need to, and second, it might be really cost prohibitive. The good part of this whole thing is that you probably will do this just once. I mean, once you have migrated your this one virtual machine from on-premise to the cloud, you're probably good. You're probably not going to do that virtual machine 100 times. Yeah, you might have up to 100 servers which you want to move, and that will take a considerable amount of time and planning, and chances are you're not going to do this all on one day, and it will be a phased approach. It's something still you need to remember. So I went ahead and uploaded this offline, and it's there in my storage, and I have been ignoring this part, or I asked you to ignore this VHD for a long time, but that's what it is. If you go to my VHDs folder here, it's Azure win8.vhd. It's the same VHD that you see over here that has been uploaded, took about an hour and a half. Okay, so there's not a whole lot that I want to cover over here with this script because you already know how to do this. The thing I wanted to show, like I mentioned, there are two things now you can do with this disk. One is you can make a virtual machine right away from this disk and not worry about doing anything else. And the way you do that is you come to the disks over here, you do create a disk, you call it my Win client or whatever, and you go to VHD URL, you come over here, pick up the VHD that you uploaded, go and do open. In our data disk session, we did not check this one. With this session, we are going to check this VHD contents and operating system, which is true. We have the entire virtual machine in there, and it's Windows or Linux, so we have the Windows. You would go ahead and click on that, and I'm not going to do that here, and I'll mention why. It will create a disk. This is called the registering the disk, or it's called associating the disk. You remember we talked about this before, that you cannot take a VHD and just spin a virtual machine out of it, because you need to first provide this to Azure as a disk that you can use. Once this disk is created over here, you basically would go to new virtual. This is a regular virtual machine, creating a virtual machine. Go to my disk here. You'll see the disk is available here right now. You select the disk, you click OK, and you go and spin the virtual machine up using the VHD you just uploaded. Okay, and this can be done in PowerShell as well. This is something I used from my old PowerShell virtual machine session we had. So I'm saying that this is going to be the virtual machine name. As soon as the disk comes over here, you will see there's a disk name. So I basically copied and pasted the disk name here. This is not the VHD name, it's the disk name. So you have to remember that. And the only other thing you have to remember is that in your VM config, rather than putting the image name, you are putting the disk name. So rather than you're saying that, hey, this is the image I want you to go data center 2012 or whatever, you say that go and put this disk name and create the virtual machine. This is similar to going to that new and selecting my disks and doing it from there. Okay. You might be wondering, hey, you always show us a demo of everything you're doing. Why you are not doing this? Well, the reason I'm not doing this is because I have saved this VHD, uploaded it for a totally different and a very cool reason, and I want to show you that. And that's the reason. That's the demo I want to give you because that's very, very cool. Even though this is probably something you'll be doing more, or this will be something it's more relevant of migrating a virtual machine. I just feel that you guys have enough knowledge right now to go and do this yourself. Okay. What I'm going to do is that VHD that we have uploaded, I'm going to create an image out of it. Okay. So rather than spinning a virtual machine out of it and forgetting, I'm going to make an image from which I can create multiple virtual machines. And how do we do that? Well, by now you just come to images here, and in images you go and create an image. So let's go create an image. We will call this Windows 8 image. Sorry, there's no spaces over here. Windows 8 image. And I'm going to put this over here and just save some time. Copy my VHD URL, and the way I do that is come over here, similar to making a disk. Copy the image over here. And I'm going to select Windows because the operating system on this is Windows. Now, I mentioned on my slides that when you upload a VHD for an operating system, if it is just for migration, you do not run sysprep. But if it is for creating an image, you go and run sysprep, which I actually did because I wanted to create an image out of it. So this is a virtual machine which I created and I ran the sysprep on before I uploaded it. Okay, so uploaded VHD is sysprepped. Let's click on OK and let this image get created. So I'll pause and come back. Okay, the image got created. Took about 10-15 seconds. So the image is created, and the way we know that is that you go to the virtual machine tab here, go under images, and you see that Windows 8 image is now created for you. Okay, so what you're going to do is I'm going to show you the PowerShell as well, how to create that on Windows 8 image. I think that's here. Yeah. So go to Ranger Store. This is the VHD. This is the image name, Windows 8 image or Windows 8 image label. Add Azure VM image. You know this commandlet already a little bit. So what this does is that it creates the image from this location and its OS is Windows. So we have used something similar earlier in this session to create images, but this is the same commandlet, but you are pointing to a media location. You're pointing to this VHD in your store, which we are. Okay? So far, so good. What can we do from this image? Well, we can spin a virtual machine out of this image, which is very obvious. So come to instances over here. There's no virtual machine yet. Create a virtual machine. I'm going to go from gallery, and this is similar to what we did with the images earlier. Go to my images, and you can see that there's a Windows 8 image that was created for us. Okay, so this image is the custom image that we just created from the VHD we uploaded. Okay, almost getting there. So call this C Ranger Win 8. Give it about 7 gigs. I want to give a username and password for my virtual machine. I know some of this is being a little repetitive because you have already done that. The account is on East US 2, so obviously the image will be, since the image is there, the VM is going to be spinned out there. So it's East US 2. Click next. Okay. And I'm going to come back once this virtual machine is created and I'm RDPing into it because, virtual machine might take some time to create from this image. I think it takes about a few minutes. So let that whole thing finish and I'll get back and I'll show you the cool stuff. Okay, our VM has been created. Let's go ahead and RDP into it. Put in the password. Please yes to that. Okay, and this is our desktop of the virtual machine. So we now have a virtual machine that was created out of an image for which the VHD was uploaded from on-premise. Some of you might have already guessed the cool part by now, but let me go and tell others what's going on here. When we create a new virtual machine from gallery, and you look at the images that Microsoft actually provides you, you will not find a single Windows client image in here. Let that be Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows whatever. There's no client operating system. But this is actually Windows 8. So we were successful in bringing a client operating system into Microsoft Azure. I've never used any client operating system in my demonstrations here. I always use Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center because, that's the one we just use, for all the server purposes these days. But there might be reasons that you need a Windows client operating system, and right now we have the capability of doing that from an image that we have created. So if you keep this image for your organization, you can go and spin as many Windows 8.1 virtual machines as you want right now. You'll be surprised that there is actually subscriptions which will have Windows client images if you are actually one of those users who is using an Azure subscription that's part of your MSDN subscription, you will have that. All the MSDN Azure subscriptions has the client image in there. And the reason it's there is because they believe that a developer might need a virtual machine, client virtual machine to, do some development work. But if you are using a regular trial, there's no client operating system in there at all, but we now have that capability. And this is really cool. We just went and if you leave this alone over here, you'll only be charged for some storage, a couple of bucks a month. But besides that, you actually have the capability of spinning Windows 8 right now in your Azure subscription. And I think this is very, very, very cool. Okay, I think we have covered everything for this session, and there is, I think we went over this images thing too. One last thing I want to talk about before we finish the session over here is that if you go to storage right now, you will see that we have the VHD obviously, which is for the VHD, and you see this is this weird VHD. That's for the operating system we just created. As much as you upload a virtual machine, there are ways to download a virtual machine as well, or a VHD as well. And you basically go and click on download over here, and it will go and download the VHD for you, okay? And you can see it's a 20 gig VHD because when I uploaded this, it was a 20 gig drive, even though only, what was it? Even 7.7 gigs was true data that was actually written. The disk was actually 20 gigs. And you know that you cannot do a dynamic disk. It converts it to fixed disk, so it was all 20 gigs. So when I'm downloading it, or when I created a virtual machine out of it, it was 20 gigs as well. The commandlet for that, I do not have a script over here, but basically the source and destination changes. The source becomes the destination, and destination becomes the source. The commandlet is, you know how for uploading we have add Azure VHD. The commandlet for downloading is save Azure VHD. That's the commandlet. Okay, so that's all I have for today. As usual, our training site is at cloudranger.net/Azure training. YouTube is at /CloudRanger Network. Twitter at CloudRanger blog, and email Sean@cloudranger.net. Thank you for all the emails you all send me. And you have comments. Some of you have some great suggestions as well. As much I appreciated that. If you have any questions specifically, please go ahead and do that on the YouTube videos. I am almost caught up with all the email questions I had this week, but if you can actually have those questions on the blog site itself or the Azure video, what will happen is that a lot of other people who might benefit from your questions can actually view that, and that will answer their question as well. People sometimes do not take the effort to ask the question, or sometimes people just do not know how to. I don't know why, but if they see the question you asked and the answer I have given, it might be beneficial for them. So that's it for today. Thank you for viewing, and I will be seeing you in our next session.